I like to start all of my recordings to my teacher by telling her hello. So if you all could say, hello, Dr. Askew, I'd appreciate that.
Hello, Dr. Askew.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here with you. This is, I think, the second women's retreat that I've been a part of. And I've been working with the youth all of these years, and with the camp programs at the retreat, and I'm graduating out of youth, and I look forward to being able to engage you all more. So
Which seminary can you go to?
Pardon me?
Which seminary?
Lexington Theological Seminary. Yes. And I graduate June 14th. I'm on the countdown. So I'm excited to share our experience from our regional mission. I'm going to use the word mission journey instead of mission trip. And that was some teachings that Week of Compassion taught us, and Disciples Home Missions. They taught us to change that language from mission trip to mission journey, because when you go on a mission journey, you are affecting the lives of the people that you encounter, but they are also impacting your life, and it is a journey for all of us. So you'll hear me use that language instead of mission trip. So if we can go ahead and go to the next slide, please.
Yeah.
You might remember this image. We're going to step back to September 20th, 2017, Hurricane Maria. Officially a Category 4, but if you talk to anyone on the island, they will dispute that and say it had to have been a 5. And as you can see, in the center of that image is the island that is just swallowed by the size of that hurricane. And our next slide. We're going to go back to see and hear what that was like.
Direct hit. Hurricane Maria slamming into the island, and as you heard, one official saying the island is destroyed. Maria is the first Category 4 to hit there in nearly a century. 150-mile-an-hour winds ripping buildings apart, knocking out power everywhere. All of the electricity is out tonight. People ordered to stay inside until at least tomorrow, and there are fears of more massive flooding to come. And the satellite image tonight showing Maria's massive size, dwarfing the island, no part of it was spared. ABC's Victor Oquendo leading us off from San Juan tonight.
Tonight, Maria's direct hit, devastating Puerto Rico. The first Category 4 storm to strike Puerto Rico in 85 years, slamming ashore around sunrise.
We are back here on the northern side of San Juan here. I can only imagine what went down when this thing made landfall in the southeast corner of this island. Obviously, the island getting closer and closer to that island wall now scraping the northern beaches here.
Roofs peeled from buildings, debris flying. Structures collapsing. Up to 30 inches of rain in some areas, engulfing whole neighborhoods. Michelle Torres using everything she can to keep the water out.
The wind howls and screeches, the doors rattle.
We are outside of San Juan in the town of Guaynabo. It was hit very hard. A lot of destruction to homes, down trees and power lines as well. And now they're dealing with this, flooding in every direction.
The emergency management director saying the entire island is destroyed. Many of these homes not built to withstand any hurricane, let alone a Category 4.
What are they paying to come out?
Is it all wind damage? Is that what happened here?
Wind damage.
Hospitals damaged, running on generator power.
We're standing on one of the busiest thoroughfares in all of San Juan, Puerto Rico, the John F. Kennedy Expressway. Not a single car in sight. We're the only ones out here. Emergency management now confirms 100% of Puerto Rico now without power. Everywhere you look, down power lines like these, which stretch right across the expressway. 12,000 people heeding the call to get to shelters, including our hotel's ballroom. Evacuees moved off this arena floor due to safety concerns. The howling wind piercing the darkness. Terrified residents singing about strength during trying times to ease the fear. David, you can see the damage right here behind me. This is what so many streets across San Juan look like tonight. Officials say many areas will be uninhabitable for weeks, maybe even months. They're urging people to shelter in place. They've issued a curfew, and the governor now saying he is launching search and rescue teams as we speak. David?
Victor Oquendo leading us off from San Juan. Victor, thank you.
Hi, everyone.
Next slide, thank you. We could do without the commercial. All right, can we go to the, there we go. So during our time in Puerto Rico, we went to the central offices in Puerto Rico, and they shared some of these images with us that they had in their office. And the top three show the just utter devastation. Washed away roads. Look at that center image. That road is clearly impassable and will be for a long time. And then on the other side there is one of the churches, one of the disciples' churches. They have over 100 disciples' congregations on the island of Puerto Rico. The island is 100 miles long, 35 miles wide. So it was really great. It's very mountainous, and so every time we came around a bend, we'd find a chalice, which was really cool. And then the lower images are all taken at the offices, and they became a central location for all of those supplies that I'm sure a lot of you participated in collecting at your congregations to send to Puerto Rico. They went to the central office there in Puerto Rico, and then they were able to get those into the hands of the congregations, and the congregations into the hands of the people in the community that needed it. And the church, even now, is a vital part of their recovery, which is still ongoing. We've all lived in Florida. Most of you, I think, everyone here has lived through a hurricane. Raise your hand. Yes? Okay. So we know the effects. We don't know what that level is. I don't. Some of you might from South Florida if you were around in Andrew. But it's, the media goes away, the recovery continues. And even now, our last storm in my area was Matthew. You can drive around, my own church included, that still has a tarp on the roof. And so when we got there, to the naked eye, things looked pretty good. But if you started really looking, you started seeing still the damaging effects of the storm. And everywhere we turned, you could hear the sounds of rebuilding and construction, still working on road repair, still working on damages to the pipes and everything underground and the drainage systems. The power has been restored 100% to the island, but the infrastructure is what still needs work. If they get slammed with something this year, it's going to be a problem all over again. We can go to our next slide. And so during our time there, I went there with the goal of learning people's stories. Stories are very powerful. And so I met three special people during our time. And so I want to share their stories with you. Jose works for the central office in the Disciples of Christ in Puerto Rico. He manages the mission groups that come in and puts them to work on the different sites. And a lot of his pay comes from Week of Compassion, Disciples Home Missions and funds like that, but also it's been funded through FEMA. He's passionate about what he does. He gives tirelessly of his time for very little pay. And while driving our group around to the different job sites each day, he started to share pieces of his story and his experience with Hurricane Maria. Jose and his family lived without electricity in their home for 9 months after the storm. He shared stories of how he and every other person on the island were forced to wait in line for 3 to 4 hours at the bank in order to get cash because you couldn't run down to the ATM because you need electricity. Once you got to the counter at the bank, you could get $20 cash. That was it. With his $20 in hand, he now needed to decide, do I put gas in the tank? Do I put gas in the gas can for my generator? Do I buy groceries for my family? I got $20 and I need to make the best use of it. He told us the day after the storm hit, there was over 150 U.S. military choppers flying back and forth across the island all day, every day. He said about 5 a.m. to 7 p.m. So I don't know if you all have ever had like a breaking news story in your area and you hear the news choppers and we're like, what's going on, It's loud. So we just lived through the horror of the storm and the noise that we heard a little bit of to now having that buzzing of the choppers all day, every day, trying to assess the needs of the island and the people on it. There was rioting and looting that developed out of desperation. Water stations and food supplies had to be guarded by people armed with M16 rifles. And once people got the supplies in their cars, then they had to worry about how to get them home. They were scared to stop at intersections because if you stopped, you were at risk of being robbed. My friend Jessie, one of my most heartfelt days in Puerto Rico was spent at the home of Jessie. We arrived at her house. It was our last full day in Puerto Rico, and we got to her house ready to work. We knew this was our last chance to kind of put that done stamp on a job, and we're really hoping that that day was going to be the day. Well, one of the biggest lessons we learned in Puerto Rico is what is meant by the term island time. The people of Puerto Rico are a much more relaxed people than us. They take time for everything, but it's important time. They use that time to make connections with people, to make sure that their needs are being met, and then we get to whatever the task is at hand. And so we arrived at her home ready to work, and then we waited. We waited while our crew leaders assessed the situation. And this was very frustrating to some of us in our group. We gung-ho, ready to get to work, but we spent half the day waiting. And so some in our group decided to pick up trash just to keep themselves busy. I chose to sit down with Jessie and hear her story. Jessie is a 32-year-old single mom of 3. She has a son in college in Puerto Rico, a daughter who went away on vacation to visit with her uncle in Connecticut, fell in love, and begged her mom to let her move there. So she lives in Connecticut now. And then she has her 8-year-old daughter who has autism living at home with her. Her daughter was away at school when we were there, so we didn't get to meet her. But during the storm, a palm tree fell on the roof of Jessie's house, broke 2 windows and damaged part of her roof. Thankfully, Jessie chose to ride out that storm around the corner at her mom's house, which is a concrete house. She also had to live with her mom during the months of recovery after the storm. She went 51 days without running water and 6 months without power. FEMA came and replaced half of her roof.
Oh.
Right. Oh. Replaced half her roof and those 2 broken windows, and then they moved on to other needs. So we were there to work on the other side. So as I said, we spent the entire morning with Jessie, and we made a special connection. It was a heart connection. It was palpable to both of us, and it was one that I will carry with me for the rest of my life. Thank goodness for Facebook, because we're Facebook friends now, and Google Translate, my best friend right now. She shared with me more than just her experience of going through Hurricane Maria, but also a part of her life's journey. She was a former police officer in the capital city of San Juan. And if you were to see her, which you will in pictures later, she's just a petite little thing. I can't imagine her being a police officer, but go her. She's lived in her home for the past 4 years. She underwent bariatric surgery in 2015, and shortly following that surgery developed a really serious blockage that landed her in ICU for 2 days. She admitted that she struggles with alcohol, but she found the church. She found Iglesia Discípulos de Cristo in Orocovis, which is the city where she lives. She's been going there for 7 months, has been baptized, and has not picked up a drink since. Soon after our arrival, she went into her house and she came back out with her hands full of homemade popsicles that she sells downtown, with all of the toppings that we could possibly want to add to our popsicles. We haven't done any work yet, but we had popsicles. She was so appreciative of our just being there because she knew we were disciples, she knew we were from the church, and she knew we were there to help. She ran back inside, came back out, just like us. Here's my family, shows us pictures of her family. And one of the most beautiful pictures I have ever seen of her baptism, and the look on her face that was captured on film, is priceless. She spoke in broken English, I spoke in broken Spanish, but together we had a wonderful conversation. She taught me that Oroclovas, that city that she lives in, is called, or it's in the center of Puerto Rico, and it's called the heart of Puerto Rico. So I bought a magnet at your local Walmart in Puerto Rico. And I told her, when I get home, I collect magnets wherever I go. When I get home, I'm going to put my Puerto Rico magnet in the center of all of my magnets. So it's at the heart of my travels as well. Still on island time and still waiting for rotten wood to be replaced, it was time to go pick up lunch. And so I offered to go with her. I had nothing else to do. So we got in the car and we headed downtown to a local bakery that she told me was run by her pastor's wife. Picked up the food, we returned home to eat. Keep in mind now we have had popsicles and a full meal. Haven't lifted a hammer. Once we finished lunch, the men who were working on replacing the wood decided they wanted some cafe, some coffee. Jessie turned and said to me, "Let's go, I don't cook, we're going to my mom's." And so we got back in the car and we drove around the little driveway to her mom's house where I got to meet her mom and her aunt. And again, broken English, broken Spanish. We had a conversation at her mom's kitchen table that ended with, "When you come back here, you stay with me." When we arrived back at Jessie's house with our freshly brewed coffee, I finally saw our team up on the roof doing some work. And after everyone had a coffee break, remember that island time thing, I finally made it up on the roof and I hammered my first ever nail into a roof. And for Manuel's story. Manuel is Jose's right-hand man at Camp Morton, the Disciples Camp, located in, I think that was in Barranquitas, if I remember. Yes. Okay. And he also works for very little pay, giving of his time and energy to the people in his community every single day. Manuel had told us that he and 3 other people spent 10 hours as the storm passed through in a 4 by 5 foot closet in their bathroom. He told us how they could hear the doors and the windows breaking in their home. And he and his son spent those 10 hours bracing a mattress against the door of that closet for the protection of those inside. And after the storm passed, different problems developed. He had a generator, but he needed gas. And he told us that he spent 16 hours in line one day so that he could buy the allotted $20 in gas per person. Oftentimes, after 10 to 12 cars would get their gas at the station would run out. And people would have to either stay in line and wait for a refill or come back the next day and start that process all over again with no guarantee that you're going to get what you need. And it was like that for gas, water, groceries, the bank, you name it. Manuel went 9 months without power in his home, and they had to use water from the mountainside for 6 months. And as service started to be restored, they would have water for 6 hours, and then it would go off for about 6 hours, and come back on for 6 and go out. And this was just this constant cycle because of the lack of energy on the island. How many of you have grandchildren? Say it like you mean it. How many have grandchildren? All right. The love of Manuel's life is his grandson. He's 4 years old, and he lives in Hayuga. I don't know if I said that right, but I practiced on the way here. Hayuga is about an hour and a half away from Manuel's house. And after the storm, with all of the road damage and debris, power line issues, etc., it took him 6 to 8 hours to get to his grandson's home. He told us that his home was about 20 minutes away from downtown, but the bridge that you needed to get to downtown was washed out. And so that 20-minute drive now took well over 2 hours. And in some places, the U.S. Army had to drop food in by helicopter, food and supplies, because the people couldn't get out and the help couldn't get in. There was no self-service on the island, and the only radio station that worked was one. So communication grounded to a halt. So imagine being stuck in line, waiting for whatever supply you need, and it's hours and hours and hours go by, and you can't call home and say, hey, honey, I'm okay, I'm just in line. And so you're left at home worrying, are they okay? Did they make it safe? Did they get robbed? All of this across the entire island. Manuel lives in a concrete house, and for the houses in Puerto Rico, that means the walls are concrete, but also the roof is concrete. And he told us that during the storm, his wife came to him and said, hey, those walls, they're moving. And he said, no. And he's trying to be strong and not show any fear during the storm, that she was just imagining it. But then the water started to rise in their home. And he says, as he's telling us the story, he makes this motion with his hands. He said, that standing water, I saw it swaying. So if the water is swaying, your walls are moving. And that was a big problem across the island. These concrete structures were swaying in the force of the wind. So where the roof meets the walls started to crack, and then water would get in. And so that's what happened at his house. And so that's the reason that one of the homes that we were working on had a concrete roof. And so we were painting rubber sealant on. Other teams had come and prepared it, so we got to come in for the clean work and just paint the rubber sealant on the roof to protect it from further water damage. And he admitted to me that he'd been so busy working on everyone else's houses that he and his wife finally used the money to replace the lost living room sofa in February of this year. All right, Paul, if we could go to the next slide. I think this is going to be a video of our time in Puerto Rico. Before I move into the next part, I just want to ask if you guys have any questions. Yes?
Do the people give you any indication that they feel safe or unsafe during all of this?
You mean right now or following the storm?
Well, in either situation, because it seems like it's still not the way it's supposed to be right now.
I can tell you, we traveled quite a bit. Betsy crammed a lot into our time there, so we were in the capital, we were in the mountains, we were on the east side, and we never felt unsafe. Yeah. We were very welcomed. In fact, when we were at the disciples' camp, we would use like a 15-passenger van to get wherever we needed to go, and the community recognizes that van as a sign of hope, because they know what's inside that van is there to help them.
In the community,
Mm-hmm.
do they feel safe? Because it seems like when your home is wrecked, that's keeping.
I didn't notice any sense of fear when we were there. I'm sure it was very different post-storm, immediately following, but we never felt unsafe where we were. The only thing I would say is that I spent some time with Selena Reyes, who is the pastor in Ocoee, and she was very cautious about leaving your bags or anything in the car. She locked everything in the trunk when we were in San Juan, because I think snatch and grab is kind of an issue down there, and she wouldn't go down there at night. But other than daytime, we were fine. Yeah. Yes.
Did you have access to electricity when you were doing this work?
Yes, we did. I will say that most of the tools that were used, they were all manual. So when they were cutting the wood, they were out there with that handsaw. And so I made a list of things that I would bring when I go back. Because one of the issues, we had a group of 7, and there would be 3 paintbrushes and 1 roller kind of thing. So I would pack some of those things when I take my congregation back next year. Yeah. But everything was powered 100% restored on the island, but it's very old school in how to get things done. So, any other questions? Okay. So, Linda, thank you. She messaged me, I think when I was in Puerto Rico, about coming here, and so I was very excited to do this, and she told me that your focus was going to be on the Great Commission. So if we could pull that slide up, Paul, please. Thank you. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations. There are few biblical texts that are quoted as much as this one is, and it's usually known as the Great Commission. Over centuries, these words have inspired thousands of believers to take the gospel to the farthest corners of the earth. Some have crossed streets, others have crossed rivers, borders, and even oceans. Some have given money, and some have given their lives. Some were well received, and others died as martyrs at the hands of whom they were coming to evangelize. Churches have been built, schools and hospitals have been founded, injustices have been undone, and women have been liberated from the oppression of ancestral customs. Millions have learned how to improve their livestock, how to care for their health, and how to read. And hundreds of languages that were available only in oral form have been now put in written form. If that were the entire story, there would be ample reasons for Christians to be proud of their work and of their history. But there's another side to that mission coin. Through the centuries, even to this day, Christians have used these words of Jesus as justification for gaining wealth and for imperialistic purposes. Christians have taken the missionary directive as an indication of their own superiority, and with that sense of superiority, they have destroyed cultures and civilizations. They have established and supported tyrannical regimes. They have employed armed violence to force others to believe as they do. In short, they have justified the unjustifiable. The history of the expansion of Christianity is at the same time both inspiring and terrifying. It is both a call and a warning. It calls us to join a shining legacy of those who witnessed to their faith. And it warns us of the danger of imagining that because we are faithful Christians, we need not be concerned over the consequences of our attitudes and our actions. So let's take a look again at the Great Commission itself. It begins with the words, "Go therefore." The word therefore requires an antecedent or a reason for what follows. And in this case, the antecedent are the words of Jesus. All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me, he says. The reason why believers are to go to all nations is not because we feel sorry for those who are lost, or that our culture is superior, or even that we have something to teach others. The reason for our going is the universal power of Jesus Christ, who tells us that all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to him. There is no place where he is not present. There is no place where he needs believers to take him. Jesus, who was at the beginning of creation with God, through whom all things were made, the light that enlightens everyone, is already there. Jesus is active in individuals and cultures, even though they may not be aware of it. So the very most that believers can do as they bear witness and invite others to believe is to present the name of Jesus, his teachings, and his promises. But I can assure you, they are not taking him anywhere that he is not already present. So if Jesus is already there before we even arrive, this means that in missions, we go out to meet not only those who believe, but we also go out to meet Jesus, in whom we do believe. As Christians go to places all over, and those places over which his authority is real, even though it may be unrecognized, we learn more about Jesus and his purpose. So I would ask you, is the Great Commission a mission that is possible? And to that I would say that the future is as bright as the promises of God. Jesus Christ is the Lord of history. He is the Lord of the present, and he is the Lord of the future.
Amen.
He promises us in Matthew chapter 28, verse 20, that he will be with us always, even to the end of the world.
Yes, Lord.
So accept your mission. Continue to share the love of God with those whom you encounter. And remember, you don't need to travel across the planet to be a part of God's mission. Your mission field is wherever your feet are planted. Thank you.